Lena Parker woke screaming in a dark, unfamiliar room. Across from her, crouched in the corner, sat a boy she had never met, Evan Blackwood, staring with eyes too empty, too knowing, as if he had been waiting for her. The air smelled of rain and something far older, something alive. And in that instant, Lena realized the dream she had last night wasn't a dream at all. It was a warning. I woke to the smell of rain, sharp and wet, though my window was tightly shut. The first thing I noticed was the silence, heavy and unnatural, as if the world had paused and left me behind. Normally, the patter of raindrops on the roof would have been comforting, rhythmic, almost soothing, but today it felt like a warning. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to shake off the remnants of the dream that had wrenched me awake. It had been vivid, painfully vivid, like stepping into a memory I didn't want to remember. In the dream, I was standing in my living room, watching myself sit on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. My double didn't just mimic me. It existed independently, moving with a calm, deliberate grace that I couldn't explain. Its smile was slow, crooked, and wrong. I wanted to look away, to tell myself it was impossible, but I couldn't. Something in its gaze was magnetic, pulling me in with a cold, insidious curiosity. I sat up, heart thudding, and scanned my surroundings. My apartment seemed ordinary, exactly how it should be. The couch cushions in place, the coffee table near the window, the faint smell of last night's coffee lingering in the air. But as I blinked, a chill ran through me. The coffee table, the same table in the dream, was different. The vase that had been upright when I fell asleep was now tipped over, water pooling across the floor, tiny droplets scattered across the carpet like breadcrumbs. My stomach twisted. Dreams didn't do this. Dreams didn't reach out into the waking world and rearrange objects, and yet here it was, undeniable proof that something had crossed over. I rubbed my eyes, hoping I was imagining it, but the puddle reflected my own shocked face, my reflection trembling with every heartbeat. I tried to laugh, to dismiss the fear crawling up my spine as paranoia, but the sound of my own voice seemed distant, hollow, as if the room itself had swallowed it. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the window in uneven bursts, each tap like a countdown to something unseen. I couldn't sit still. Every instinct screamed at me to check every corner of the apartment, to search for intruders, for signs of life, for anything that would explain the impossible. I moved cautiously through the rooms, each step deliberate, yet my senses screamed that something was lurking just beyond perception. Shadows seemed to shift when I glanced away, and the hum of the refrigerator sounded sharper, more mechanical, almost like a low growl. By the time I returned to the living room, the sense of wrongness had grown unbearable. I approached the coffee table slowly, dread tightening around my chest. The vase had shattered slightly, jagged edges glinting in the dim light, and I could have sworn the water had formed letters, or maybe shapes, but they dissolved into normal puddles whenever I leaned closer. My hands shook as I wiped at the mess, trying to restore some order, some control, but every motion felt futile. It was then I realized the television was on, though I hadn't touched it. The screen was black, but faint static flickered across it, like a heartbeat in the dark. My reflection in the glossy screen seemed different somehow. Not quite me. I stepped back, my pulse hammering, and the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. And then, in the silence that followed the static, I felt it. The unmistakable sensation of being watched, not just by the shadows, not just by my own reflection, but by something else entirely, something patient, something waiting. I froze, unwilling to move, unable to breathe. The air grew colder, and a whisper of movement brushed against the edge of my vision. I blinked. Nothing. My apartment was empty. I told myself it was impossible, that I was imagining it, that the dream had left its stain on my mind. But deep down, I knew better. Something had crossed over from the dream, and it was still here, waiting. I didn't leave my apartment that day. I couldn't. The world outside felt foreign, distorted, like stepping into a version of reality that had been subtly twisted while I slept. Every time I tried to focus on normal tasks, checking emails, scrolling through my phone, attempting to force mundane routines, the memories of the dream clawed back at me, vivid and insistent. My double sitting on the couch, smiling that crooked, unnatural smile, haunted every corner of my mind. It wasn't just the image itself, it was the way it existed, so certain, so deliberate, as if it knew I was watching it, even when I wasn't. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was overreacting, but overreacting didn't explain the tipped vase, the puddle of water, or the unease that had settled like a weight in my chest. I spent the day moving cautiously through my apartment, scanning each room for signs that the dream had touched reality again. Every surface, every shadow seemed loaded with potential threats. I avoided mirrors, fearing what I might see reflected back. Not just myself, but that other me, lurking just beyond comprehension. Even the soft hum of the refrigerator sounded different, heavier somehow, like it was vibrating with intent. My heart refused to slow, and the constant tension left me jittery, unable to sit or rest. Each step across the wooden floorboards felt exaggerated, every creak a warning. My apartment had become a minefield of subtle disturbances, each one hinting that I wasn't truly alone, that the boundaries between dream and reality were dissolving. As night fell, I forced myself into the living room, determined to stay awake, to keep watch. The lights were harsh, casting sharp shadows that danced across the walls with the movement of the streetlights outside. Sleep felt impossible, yet inevitable. My eyelids grew heavy despite my fear, and when I finally drifted, I found myself back in the kitchen of the dream. Everything was wrong. The cabinets were slightly warped, the utensils scattered in impossible arrangements, and the refrigerator seemed taller, its surface distorted as if bending toward me. And then I saw it. Words etched across the fridge in a language I didn't recognize. Symbols that pulsed with a strange internal light, spelling something I couldn't read aloud. But in the pit of my stomach, I understood. They knew me. They knew my name. I jolted awake, breath sharp, chest tight. The room was dark, but the kitchen, my real kitchen, was not as it should have been. The fridge door was slightly ajar, magnets rearranged into jagged patterns. I hadn't touched them. My mind raced, trying to find an explanation, sleepwalking, stress, imagination, but every rational thought felt hollow against the undeniable evidence of the impossible. I wanted to leave, to run, to get out of my apartment and never return, but fear rooted me to the spot. Something was watching, something patient, lingering in the corners of perception. It didn't move, didn't make noise, but its presence pressed against me with quiet insistence. I could feel the gaze, sharp and penetrating, scanning me from angles I couldn't identify. I spent hours sitting in the living room, lights blazing, hands pressed to my temples, trying to calm the pounding in my head. Every sound was amplified, the tap of rain, the hum of electronics, the faint scuff of feet on the floor above. I kept imagining it, my double moving just beyond the edge of vision, tilting its head, smiling that slow, crooked smile. The line between what I had dreamed and what was real was vanishing. I was no longer certain if the events around me were products of imagination or proof of something far darker. And then, as the rain continued to lash against the windows, I felt it. The unmistakable sense of a presence standing right behind me, breathing softly, waiting. Sleep had become my enemy. Every night, the moment my eyelids grew heavy, I was pulled into that other world, a place where nothing obeyed the laws of reality, and the air itself seemed thick with malice. I tried to stay awake, forcing myself to focus on small, mundane tasks, but exhaustion was relentless. Eventually, my body gave in, and the dream came like a storm I couldn't escape. That night, I found myself walking down the street outside my apartment, drenched in rain. Though in the waking world my hair and clothes were dry, the streetlights flickered, casting long shadows that twisted and merged with the darkness around them. The houses, familiar and ordinary during the day, had transformed. Doors were taller, windows slanted, and the pavement seemed to stretch farther than it should. Every detail was wrong, yet disturbingly familiar, as if I were walking through a distorted reflection of my own neighborhood. I tried to tell myself it was just a dream, yet the fear pulsing through my veins felt real. I walked slowly, each step measured, ears straining for the faintest sound. That's when I saw it. A shadow crouched in front of one of the houses, its form impossible to define in the dim light. I froze. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat echoing in my ears. Slowly, deliberately, the shadow lifted its head, and I saw a face staring back at me. My face. Every feature matched mine, every subtle expression mirrored perfectly. But the eyes glinted with something alive, something hungry, something I didn't recognize in myself. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to obey. My body felt weighted, trapped in some invisible hold, as if the dream had claimed me completely. The double moved closer, its smile widening with a slow, deliberate cruelty. It didn't speak, but its presence pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. I tried to blink, to wake up, to pull myself free, but the world didn't shift. Instead, the street seemed to stretch further into darkness, the houses bending and twisting like they were alive, reaching toward me. I could feel the rain soaking through my clothes, though when I checked, my skin was dry. Panic gripped me, hot and suffocating, and I fell to my knees, desperate to escape the nightmare that had somehow become more real than the world I thought I knew. I woke, choking, sweat soaking my hair, gasping for air as if I had been underwater. The apartment was dark, silent, but nothing felt safe. Every shadow seemed heavier, every corner darker than it should be. I could still feel the presence of that double lurking just out of sight, patient and unyielding. I moved through the rooms cautiously, checking every surface, every mirror, every reflection, but the apartment appeared empty. And yet, when I glanced at the living room mirror, I swore I saw something shift behind me, a flicker of motion too fast to be natural. I spun around. Nothing. The space was empty. My hands trembled as I touched the glass, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light, a residue of the dream clinging to my senses. But deep down, I knew the truth. The line between reality and nightmare was gone, and whatever had taken form in my dreams was learning to exist here, too. I wasn't awake. Not really. I started leaving notes for myself, scribbling warnings and instructions on scraps of paper, desperate for some sense of control. "Don't sleep in the living room," one read. "Lock every door," another. I even wrote reminders to check every mirror, every reflection, every shadow before closing my eyes. But even these precautions felt useless. The dreams didn't wait for me. They found me wherever I was, lurking in the corners of my vision, twisting reality in subtle, horrifying ways. Objects in my apartment began moving on their own. Books I hadn't touched slid across shelves. Drawers I had firmly closed creaked open slowly. And sometimes, when I glanced up, I could swear I saw someone sitting across the room, just out of focus, watching me with impossible patience. I stopped trusting my own senses. Every sound, every shift of light, every faint movement felt like a trap. My reflection in windows and mirrors began to seem wrong. Once, while brushing my teeth, I caught a glimpse of myself in the bathroom mirror, and my reflection blinked before I did. My heart froze. I stumbled back, teeth chattering, staring at the glass as my reflection smiled that same slow, crooked grin I had seen in my dreams. I wanted to scream, but no sound would come. My own voice had abandoned me. I realized then that the boundary between the dream world and the waking world was not just thin, It had shattered completely. Whatever had been confined to my nightmares was creeping into reality, step by careful step. The nights grew worse. The dreams were no longer confined to abstract spaces. They mirrored my apartment in horrifying detail, down to the smallest object. Each night, I woke to find subtle changes I hadn't made. Doors slightly ajar, lamps turned the wrong way, photographs tilted. One morning, I found a note on my pillow, written in my own handwriting. "You are not awake. You are never awake." My stomach twisted. I had written it, but I hadn't. I knew it. That same chilling certainty that had haunted me in dreams now stalked my waking hours. Fear was no longer enough to keep me alert. It was everywhere, pressing against me, suffocating me. I began to avoid mirrors entirely, covering them with cloths, staring at my reflection only in the darkened screen of my laptop. Yet even there, the flicker of movement was enough to make me shiver. One evening, I glanced up from my work to see the screen's black reflection ripple like water, and a face stared back at me. Not mine, though it was somehow identical. It leaned closer, tilting its head, grinning with a patience that was unbearable. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair, the noise echoing through the apartment. When I dared to look again, the reflection was gone. But the feeling of eyes boring into me didn't leave. I realized, with a cold, sinking certainty, that I was living in someone else's nightmare. The dreams were learning, growing bolder, shaping my reality to match their rules. The air itself felt charged, thick with something I couldn't see, yet could feel coiling around me like a snake. Every attempt to escape seemed pointless. And when I turned the corner to go to my bedroom that night, I froze. The door was open. I hadn't touched it. And on the floor, my notes, the ones I had written to protect myself, were scattered, words rearranged into symbols I didn't recognize, glowing faintly in the dark. I swallowed hard. Something was inside my apartment. Something patient, waiting. Something I couldn't fight. I decided I couldn't run from it anymore. Avoiding sleep, avoiding mirrors, avoiding my own reflection had only made it stronger. Whatever this thing was, whether it was a copy of me from another world or something wearing my face like a mask, it was already inside my life. So I did the only thing left. I sat alone in the living room, lights off, waiting to face it. I let myself drift towards sleep, not fighting this time. The moment my eyes closed, I felt the shift. The room around me didn't dissolve. It stayed exactly the same, as if the dream had risen up to meet reality instead of dragging me elsewhere. I stood, or thought I did, in the same living room, same shadows, same furniture, but the air was thicker, heavier. It felt like breathing through cloth. Then I saw movement near the doorway. The double emerged from the hall, its steps slow and deliberate, every motion controlled. Seeing it in the same room I was in, not some warped dream version, but here, in my real space, paralyzed me. It stopped only a few feet away, head tilted as if studying me. I wanted to wake up, but I couldn't be sure I was even asleep. That was the worst part. I couldn't tell which state I was in. Maybe there was no difference anymore. The double's smile spread, wide and unnatural, as though stretching the skin of my own face too far. Its eyes gleamed with recognition, like it had been waiting for this moment. I tried to move, to back away, but my body obeyed nothing. I could only stare as it leaned closer, its breath ice-cold against my skin. It lifted its hand and brushed my cheek with the back of its fingers, slow and deliberate. The touch felt real. Too real. I woke, or thought I did, sitting upright at my desk, my laptop open and running. My hands were on the keyboard, as if I had been typing for hours. Notes covered the screen, lines I didn't remember writing. Every sentence described what I had just experienced, word for word, detail for detail. The document ended mid-sentence, as if I had been interrupted. I slowly lifted my eyes to the dark laptop screen, and there it was again. my reflection staring back. But this time, it did not blink when I did. It blinked after, as though imitating me a fraction of a second too late. I stared, frozen, waiting for it to move again. And it did. Not a glitch, not a trick, but a deliberate motion, a small, slow smile spreading across its face while mine stayed still. My stomach dropped. I reached out and tested the surface of the desk with my fingers. Solid. Awake. Real. But the reflection kept smiling, wider and wider, until it seemed to stretch beyond what a human face could manage. Then the screen glitched, just for a moment, and I saw something behind the reflection. A room that looked like mine, but darker, deeper, like another layer of reality stacked behind this one. And in that room, another version of me stood in the corner, not smiling, just watching, motionless, as if waiting its turn. The screen went black again. No reflection, just darkness. But I could feel it. One of them was no longer behind the glass. And now, I don't know if I ever actually woke up.